Hi, everyone, and welcome. My name is Yasamin Sharifzadeh. I'm a PGY3 at the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota, and today I'll be discussing the top resources for success in Rad-Onc Clinic with my colleagues, James Randall, who's a PGY4 at Northwestern, and Leah D'Souza, who's a PGY3 at Rush. We're all coming from different organizations and sharing with you some of our top picks of resources that have been helpful in clinic. James is representing the Radiation Oncology Education Collaborative Study Group, and Leah is representing eContour. So I first wanted to start off talking about the resources that ACRO can provide for all residents. All you need to do is sign up. It's a free account. It's just a login, and then you'll have access to pretty much all of the amazing resources that ACRO has put forth for you. A lot of them have been resident made. So there are mainly 4 resources that are super helpful. One of them is a resource sheet. It's a 15-page document with all the links to contouring atlases and foundational trials that you could need. Second is ACRO Decks. This is a recent creation from one of the residents in the committee. It goes through step by step, slide by slide for the really big need to knows for different disease sites. And at the end, there are questions to test your knowledge. We have a YouTube channel that explains the basics of radiation and brachytherapy, and we also have a few really interesting webinars. So this is the ACRO website. The way to get to this page is to go to the ACRO website and go to Residents Corner, and then you'll see this. If you don't have a login, you won't be able to click on each thing individually, but you can see the webinars, the resource sheet, the ACRO decks, and there's much more. So first I wanted to go over the resource sheet. As you can see, it's this long document and it has all the links. So for example, let's say you wanted to know how to contour the prostate fossa. It has the contouring guidelines, society guidelines, other relevant trials. There's ones for intact prostate, goes on and on. These are our ACRO decks. It's still a project that's in progress, but for example, this one is for early non-small cell lung cancer. It goes through the differential workup, staging, and treatment guidelines, really high yield stuff. And then at the end, there are review questions to test your knowledge, so that can be really helpful. This is our ACRO Residents YouTube page. We have some pretty short videos that would be great if you're a PGY2, just getting to know radiation oncology. It goes over types of radiation therapy, brachytherapy applicators and instruments, and basics of IGRT. So really great stuff to get you started for clinic early on. And then finally, we have webinars that go through anything from clinic to, diversity and inclusion to more lab-based stuff. So you name it, there's probably a webinar on this topic, and they go all the way back to 2016. The next thing I wanted to talk about is Rad-Onc tables. So Rad-Onc tables was initially created by, a resident who's now an attending. It is also comes in app form, and then online it's a Google Doc. So there are 2 Google Docs that are available. One of them is one that has all the key studies you need to know per disease site. And then there's one that's for oral boards mostly. This is one of my favorite resources because you can just control find a keyword and the information that you need really just pops up. So super easy to locate anything you want. And my personal favorite is the oral boards sheet. It's a very high yield, quick summaries for workup, treatment, sim, dose, contours, fields, chemo, and at the very end, there's like 1 to 2 high yield papers. So this is the website here. And then you can download the app or you can go to the sheets. So you can see that here as well. And then this is my favorite table. For the longest time, I had a lot of difficulty learning about seminoma, and I just wanted to show you this. Like, it goes through the workup, the treatment, talks about in great detail what a modified dogleg field is versus a classic field, talks about chemo, and then at the very end shows you the resources that they use to come up with this row. So super quick, high yield. And then finally, there's Rad-Onc Review. It's kind of similar to other resources, but it's more detailed, I would say. So it's probably better for late PGY 2-year and onward. Also easy to control find things. And it also includes the less common disease sites. Let's say that you're seeing something in clinic that's more rare and there's not enough in other resources. This resource might be somewhere you might want to check out. So here's the main page. And then if you click on head and neck, for example, it has all the things you'd want to know. Like, for example, Merkel cell carcinoma can be hard to find information on, but this has a really great section on it. But for simplicity's sake, I'll just show you, like, you click on head and neck and the staging comes up, and then it goes into detail on all the general staging, and then you can go into more specific staging for each disease site. So this is definitely more detailed. The one thing I'd say about this is that be careful. This is a collaborative website, so you might want to put yourself on like viewing mode only, or else you might accidentally type something in there. But yeah, otherwise, great resource. Okay, and with that, I'll hand it off to James.
Awesome, thank you. So I'll go ahead and share my screen. So as Yasamin mentioned, I am the Radiation Oncology Education Collaborative Study Group, or ROECSG, resident representative. That basically means that I serve a 2-year term where I help relay information back and forth from the organization itself to all the different residents whom I'm personally in contact with, as well as other organizations like ACRO and ACRO. The whole goal of ROECSG is to make radiation oncology education accessible to all parties. There's different subgroups, including GME, medical student, patient education, and then continuing education as well. I highly recommend, if you're interested, maybe once you get your feet wet into radiation oncology, if you're interested in joining, reach out to someone in ROECSG to get involved in one of the subgroups and help contribute to radiation oncology education. That being said, ROECSG itself is a great source for education. If I can go ahead and share the website here. There we go. Okay. So this is the ROECSG website. When you come to the homepage, this is where you land. There's some general information here, really good stuff. And then the important stuff, I think, for us, especially when we start, is the Intro to Radiation Oncology page. There's some really great seminars here that are really sort of med student level, but it's a great introduction to radiation oncology, especially because we get very little education on the field when we're in medical school. And there's also information itself on medical education theory. And then the one that I recommend most for this topic is the IROC for new residents. The IROC was set up a couple years ago as an introductory course for radiation oncology residents. A lot of programs actually instituted it as part of their onboarding or part of their orientation. There's a couple sessions here, and they all cover different topics that are really important for clinical workflow and help sort of get you ingratiated into the workflow very easily. So I really recommend checking these out. I think they're each about 30 minutes to an hour or so. So definitely worth checking out if it's not already instituted as part of your orientation for your program. And then, of course, just like ACRO, there's also a lot of general information as well. If you go to web resources, there's some really good information here on reference resources, websites you should really be aware of, like ASTRO, ARO, RTOG, et cetera. There's some really good global health education that's going on, some grants and awards you might be interested in once you get into residency, and then some journal websites as well to keep an eye on. Of course, there's a bunch more opportunities for education here, but the one that I wanted to highlight the most is study materials. These are things that you can take a look at. Obviously, Yasamin already mentioned a few of them. RadOnc Review is on here. RadOnc Questions is really good as well. It's often included as part of your residency, RadOnc Questions, but if it's not, it could be worth spending money on as practice review for your exams that come up in the future. Yeah, so I highly recommend taking a look at the website. There's a bunch that I didn't mention as well, so feel free to explore. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me personally as well, or whoever the radiation oncology resident representative is at that time. And moving on, the next resource I wanted to talk about was a podcast called At the Beam. This is a medical education podcast put on by Trudy Wu and Josh No. They're both PGY4, I believe, residents at UCLA and Stanford, respectively. I really enjoy this podcast. As a busy resident and a busy person in general, I don't have a lot of time to sit down and read textbooks. So what I love to do is listen to podcasts when I'm doing chores or walking to and from work or walking around the city in general. And so this is a great way to get some of that education and get some of that review as well of topics. They cover all different clinical topics, typically by site. So there's GU, GI, for instance, and they're still ongoing, and they're going back in a little bit more detail now with their most recent season. And I'll go ahead and share their website. It should be available on pretty much any podcast platform. So this is the website. When you come to the landing page, they'll have their most recent episode. For instance, this one's called Clinical Scaries GU. I believe it's a little bit of a review about GU and some things that you're likely to get asked in the clinic by your attendings. If you go to the top right here, you can see that there's episodes where you can see all the different episodes. Looks like they're now on season 2, episode 5. So there's definitely some that I've missed. But I would go back and take a look at these as a good review or even a good introductory resource as you switch from one rotation to another. They're typically about 10 to 20 minutes, I believe. Some might be a little bit longer than that, but they're very digestible, and I would highly recommend those. And so the last one that we're going to talk about today, or that I'm going to talk about, is The Essentials of Clinical Radiation Oncology. By now, you've probably already heard of this book, often colloquially referred to as the Red Book. This is a great reference book that covers pretty much every topic from benign disease to all the different malignancies. And it covers it very succinctly, exactly what you need to know across the different treatment sites. And they cover all topics from epidemiology, anatomy, pathology, genetics, clinical presentation, workup, treatment paradigm, and then some evidence-based Q&A, or what you should know from the literature for each site. And I believe Leah was going to chat next a little bit more about this.
Yeah, thanks, James. So I think what's really interesting about this resource as well, personally, I love it. It's very well organized. It is chunked into digestible pieces of information. And what's really important, as James was explaining, is sometimes we don't necessarily have a lot of time to do reading in between clinic and, contours and preparing for your next day. But for example, if you have case conference coming up in your next academic hour, it's really good for a quick read the night before to help you prepare for that as well. Just to be mindful that if you are a visual learner, this is a very text heavy book. So, you might need to supplement with another form of education. But honestly, I take this book wherever I go. And, usually most departments will cover this book as part of your introductory package. But if not, it's priced at $99. So the next resource that I wanted to share with everyone is eContour. And as Yasamin explained, I'm one of the associate editors of eContour. So completely non-biased, before I had even started this role at eContour, I started using this resource in my PGY2. I think it's a great resource for you to get familiar with contours and also with reference guidelines. Not to mention, it is a free resource, so that is extremely helpful. So let me take a, dive into this resource and we can have a look at some of the features. Okay, so here we are on eContour. I've pulled up one of the cases that you can possibly view. There are a number of disease sites for you to check out. For example, if we go to a lung disease site, our most recent case that we published live was a thymic carcinoma. So if you click into that case, you're going to see some really interesting features that are available. You will see that there are OARs, or your organs at risk, which you can toggle on and off respectively, and then the target structures as well. Really interesting to know that there are also different overlays. So for example, if you have a fusion with a CT pre-op or an MRI, that's really helpful. But most importantly, I think it's really neat to pay attention to the information that you see on the right hand of the screen in the different tabs for the prescription, the contours, and the pearls. This is really well linked to other resources to help guide you. And then I just want to also bring your attention to another aspect of eContour, which can be found in the guidelines section. And if I click on that in further detail, you will see that there are a number of different guidelines that can help you when it comes to the details of contouring, whether it's your GTV to a CTV to PTV expansion. So these are really important to check out as well. All right, and the last resource that I wanted to bring your attention to is one known as eAnatomy. This is a web-based resource, and you can find the link on the top over here. I think it's really important that not only do we have to pay attention to the important studies that guide our treatment recommendations, but anatomy and radiology are really part of the foundations of radiation oncology. Because if you can't read your scans very well, that's going to be challenging when it comes to contouring. And so, when you start off, perhaps reading radiology reports sounds like a different language, but using this resource is really helpful to help, just make you more familiar. The more time you spend looking at CT scans or MRI scans, you're going to feel more comfortable. So it's really helpful to help you master basic organs, and then also just have an understanding of the different modalities between CT and MR. I really like this resource as well, and we'll have a look at it in more detail, but it helps to delineate nodal levels. And this is an annual subscription that can be purchased for $89. Okay, so I've just jumped right into the resource. There are different types of products available based on the subscription package that you would sign up for. But really, really neat to look at this. For example, I'm looking at a CT of a head and neck, and I can toggle on and off different features to help, identify things. But more importantly, these structures or these areas overlay. What's really cool as well is you can see it from the different views. So that's extremely helpful. And you can also reconstruct them in a 3D view. So if we take a look back at this, just to help you get oriented a bit, there is even more than just head and neck. It comes to brain MRIs, there are CT bodies, CT spines, MR spines. So I think it's really helpful and a good resource, definitely if you're struggling with your anatomy and radiology.
So that's all we have. So thanks for tuning in. Again, I'm Yasamin Sharifzadeh. We had James Randall and Leah D'Souza join us today. These are our emails. Feel free to reach out to us with any questions or concerns that you have about resources or residency in general. Thanks, everybody.